Hello and welcome back to the What is Life Dude podcast, everybody. We are your hosts, Eric and Sarah.
Welcome back. A quick reminder, we are now filming all of our podcast episodes moving forward. So if you'd rather listen with a little bit of a visual element, check out our YouTube channel.
What is Life Dude podcast.
Yes.
Yes. So first thing I noticed when we started recording this episode is that, I shaved my face, which is something I never really ever do. Mm-hmm. And the microphone feels so nice up against my upper lip, which usually has a very thick mustache on it.
Right.
I can really feel the breeze up there. I also noticed how small my upper lip is. Mm-hmm. I just shaved it and I was like, it's so tiny. It's like a quarter of an inch wide. It's just very, very small.
I have to admit, Eric has only shaved once over the course of our relationship. So it was mildly unsettling.
I think it still is.
To see, you just look so different from what I'm used to. So it's finally kind of settled in for me, but
yeah, that's because it's growing back.
Just in time for it to grow back. I'm getting used to the new look.
Yeah. All right. So aside from my mustache or lack thereof, what are we talking about today?
Okay. Today's topic is going to be about synchronicity, but a different way of thinking about it. We're going to be kind of giving another life update, but we're going to weave in this thing that's been coming up a lot for us, which is kind of taking negative experiences or roadblocks and finding the hidden upside, I guess, the benefit, kind of learning to consider not just positive, lucky things as synchronicities, but also what we would initially consider to be negatives.
Yeah. So kind of the first thing we want to talk about we're going to give this a little move update, but it also ties into the bigger topic. So we're moving to Atlanta for at least 2 months. We have a temporary housing solution. My cousin Dylan lives out there and he has spent his whole life there. So he knows a bunch of people. And basically he has a friend of a friend of a friend who has 2 houses. And she's not living in her Atlanta house for the summer. So we're going to stay there for July and August, potentially longer on a month-to-month basis. But it's fully furnished and
super convenient, very
Yes.
lucky, because we were kind of floundering trying to decide where we were going to move next. We weren't ready to commit to another place, but we just knew we wanted to leave Colorado. And then this opportunity just kind of came out of nowhere. And we were like, dang, I guess we're going to Atlanta.
Yeah, so our original plan was to do what we have done the last 2 times when we've moved, which is put all of our stuff in one of those moving pods, get it shipped to Atlanta, unload it into, it's a very big house, which is cool. We were just going to kind of unload everything into one of the extra rooms that we're not going to be using, so we don't have to pay for storage.
And then we were going to kind of apartment hunt or house hunt in Atlanta, move all of our stuff whenever we found a new place.
Yeah.
So Eric does this thing. Eric is, Virgo rising, Venus Virgo. He's very, I don't know, every time we need logistics managed, he's on it. Yeah. Every time we've moved, he's been on top of all the logistics, setting things up with the shipping pod.
That's the stuff I'm good at.
Yeah.
And
I'm terrible at that because I'm very scatterbrained and I'm fully willing to just fly by the seat of my pants with everything. So Eric's disappears one day. I'm cleaning the kitchen, trying to start packing early because the kitchen has always been a massive nightmare every time we've moved.
There's just so much stuff.
Yeah.
We just have a lot of cooking stuff.
So I'm doing that. Eric kind of disappears into the studio and I find out he's trying to set up our shipping pod thing.
Yeah, so I was talking to the company and getting a quote, and basically we haven't gotten any extra furniture, anything of note since we've lived here. So we have the same amount of stuff we need to move. And
we might even have less.
We might even have less. And it's roughly the same distance as last time we moved. So I checked, got a quote, and the price was twice as much as it was last time.
A lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Especially because it was not the primary reason, but one of the reasons that we wanted to move to a different place is that the cost of living in Colorado is skyrocketing. And we don't love it enough here to justify paying that much. And very quickly we realized that all of the moving costs, especially now it's summer, most popular time to move. And we live in a college town, so I'm sure that affects.
And inflation is at an all-time high with everything. Yeah.
The rent is too damn high. So we quickly realized that the cost of moving everything right now would kind of outweigh what we like. It would eliminate our savings basically from moving to a lower cost of living area over the course of a year.
Right. Like by paying that much, we might as well just rent a super expensive place in Colorado. And over the course of a year, we'll end up having paid the same amount.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, that's not going to do.
And on top of that, we were like, well, what if we go to Atlanta and we don't like it enough to move there permanently? Then we're going to pick up and move all of our crap again. We
were just feeling really stuck,
panicked
and kind of paralyzed.
Yeah.
Because we were like, what do we do? Do you want to tell them what we did? What we decided?
You tell them.
So we decided, well, first, before we even get there, the first thing we did is say, do we even want to move to Atlanta? Should we just move somewhere closer?
Right.
Should we just move to Kansas City? Because Kansas City is like 9 hours away driving from Colorado. Like it's really not that far. And we were like, well, you know, we know people who have lived there and grew up there and they say it's great. And like we could live there for like a year or whatever. Then it'd be much cheaper to get our stuff there.
Every year we just move like a few states
closer to the East Coast. Yeah. But ultimately what we decided to do is put all of our stuff in a storage unit here where we live right now. Because then we don't have to worry about it. But it's part of this bigger conversation about what we own and why we own it.
Yeah.
And if we even care about any of our stuff. You know, like we were like, let's say, like we were just having this hypothetical conversation. Like, let's just say we just drive both of our cars to Atlanta and leave stuff in storage.
And just bring our essentials.
Can we fit just our essentials in the car? What do we even need? And we were talking about it and we were like,
we were writing a list, just inventorying everything we actually use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's like clothes, toiletries,
a couple of instruments,
microphones, camera. And we were like, oh yeah. Like when you take furniture out of the equation, there's, at least for us, there's so little that we actually use on a daily basis.
Right.
So we were like, yeah, we can absolutely fit all of our necessities in our cars and just put, like, we don't need our dresser and nightstands, just put it in storage and see what happens. Which that's kind of the whole point, right? Is that we were floundering and then
yeah, we came to this decision to leave everything in storage over the course of like a 1.5 hour panicked conversation, just standing in the kitchen. There's like a mess around me because I was in the middle of kind of like organizing the pantry, getting rid of stuff. And we're just like, oh my God, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And then we're like, wait, like, why didn't this occur to us sooner? We literally don't have to bring everything. We don't have to commit to anything. And this kind of leads us into the topic, which is that sometimes we're just executing our program, right? We're very fixed in our mindsets for the most part. We're very conditioned to behave in a specific way. We have our identities. And unless there are interruptions from the outside world to those patterns, we just kind of like do whatever like we're used to. And what we were used to was pack up all our crap and lug it around the country with us. You know, we've done it. Yeah. And Eric probably would have gone ahead and booked all of that if we hadn't run into that roadblock of it being like astronomically expensive.
Yeah, if it was the price it was last time, which is what we were expecting, we, like you said, we would have just been like, yep, that's what we were planning on. We did it. And instead we were like, oh, it's twice as much. What do we do? Also, we looked into moving companies versus the pods, and it was like twice as much as the twice as expensive pod. It's wild out there. Yeah. Be safe. So it was like you said at the beginning of the episode, it was like a negative, like the universe wasn't giving us something positive at first, right, but we had to find the positive in it.
And it actually was right in front of our faces, but just because of our past experience, it never occurred to us, we can just be free. Like, we don't have to plant roots right now. We can view the next several months, year, whatever, honestly, as an experimental phase and go around. We don't have to commit to moving somewhere long term until we find that place that really feels good to us.
Yeah, and speaking of this kind of solution being right in front of us, one of my sisters moved from Queens to Seattle like a year and a half ago, and they left all of their stuff in storage and just brought they rented a car and filled it with their essentials because they lived in the city. And they lived in New York City and no one has a car there. So they rented a car, filled it with all their necessities, and they've been living in Seattle with family for a year and a half. And they're like, we don't even want the shit in our fucking storage unit.
Yeah.
Like, we've forgotten about it. We've been surviving for a year and a half just with stuff that we brought in one single car. And I'm like, their experience was right in front of us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I asked. I was like, are you like fine? She's like, yeah, I don't even want my stuff anymore. And, you know, it's kind of the same thing for us. Like I said before, once you take out like, oh yeah, when we get to the house in Atlanta, there's a kitchen, there are dishes, there are glasses, there's a desk, there are 2 beds. I'm like, all we need to do is fill it with stuff to like make music and make videos and
Things
stuff.
we love,
Yeah.
you know?
So this freed up, I sound like I'm like an evangelical like shroom taker. I'm like, this freed up our minds and like let us go to places we never imagined we could go.
Yeah.
And literally we were like, we can physically go anywhere we want. And we're like, what if, even if we really like Atlanta, we're like, what if after this temporary housing solution, we like move to Costa Rica
Right.
or Mexico? And this started because we were talking to one of our friends and he was like, sometimes I just want to get out of the rat race. And like, I just want to dip. I just want to leave everything.
Did he say dip?
I don't think Brett said the word dip.
Right.
I paraphrased.
This is our very adventurous friend who has traveled a lot, was doing van life for a while. He was where did he adopt his adorable pooch?
He adopted
Mexico?
Meatball in Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
Albondiga.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like free diving in Mexico and found a stray dog and he fell in love with her and like jumped through all these hoops to get her back to the States and did successfully. But he was like, yeah, sometimes I just want to say like, fuck everything and go live in Costa Rica. He's like, you know how cheap it is there? We've been to Costa Rica and we were all just like looking at real estate there and we're like, it is not America. That's for sure.
Right.
And it kind of just like planted this seed in our heads that like, we really can go anywhere. There's a reason like digital nomad is a phrase that exists.
Yep.
So
I think that was opened up to a lot of people by the pandemic too, because everyone started to realize they didn't necessarily have to go into their office to get the exact same amount of work done. So I think it caused everyone to re-examine their priorities and realize, oh, there's more to just working and living in this loop. I mean, if you like your loop, you're welcome to.
but yeah.
Yeah.
And it was funny because we saw my Colorado family over the weekend and just as kind of like a farewell for now. And I was telling my cousins and their like partners, I was like, yeah, you know, like we're thinking of like after Atlanta, like what if we just like go to Costa Rica or something? And I keep like phrasing it
Yeah,
as like,
wouldn't that be crazy?
wouldn't that be wild? Oh my God, we would never do that unless you say it's a good idea.
Yeah, just to see what everyone's reaction would be.
Right. And all of my cousins and their partners were like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. If we didn't have the kids, we would be doing that.
If we didn't have a house or if I didn't have this job that I have to go into every day. And we were like, dang, like when you're living your life, you really kind of become numb to all the freedom you have or all the benefits you have. You know what I mean? I guess that's just human nature. Like just to quickly habituate to everything good and want more or want different. And we're like, it's really true. Like we can do our jobs from anywhere. Just need a camera and a pretty background. And
which is funny because we don't like the background. We don't like any of the backgrounds in this home that we've been living in for over a year.
Our little cave.
Just the irony of, yeah, we've been making it work. But yeah, I mean,
no kids, no pets, no property. We don't really own anything of consequence, which, I mean, back to our original like our core topic, we hit this resistance from reality, and we panicked, and then we sat with it for a while, and then we realized that all of these different possibilities were open to us. And from there, we just kept peeling off more and more layers. And so kind of where we're at now is thinking, do we even want to put as much stuff into storage as we thought? Do we really, how much do we actually value all of the furniture and decorations and stuff? And yeah, so we're trying to decide how attached we are to all those things.
I have a feeling what's going to happen is we're going to put all of our stuff in storage now, come back at some point after or during the Atlanta experience or experiment and like sell a lot of the stuff and then move what's left over into a very tiny unit and leave that so we can fly away somewhere into the jungle or on the beach. And it was funny because when we were with my family, everyone I spoke to was like, oh my God, go to Costa Rica, go to Mexico, go to Guatemala, do it. And then I spoke to my 92-year-old grandparents. You need to settle down. You need to start thinking about what the rest of your life is going to look like. And I was like, I'm taking this whole thing with a grain of salt. A huge 90-year-old grain of salt.
Right.
And then I told my cousins what had happened with my grandparents, and they were like, don't listen to Grandpa.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I know. They just have a different...
Yeah, they're worried about us.
Yeah, they have a different worldview.
Yes. Right. So I guess to wrap up this little segment of the episode, I think sometimes we are wanting something in our lives. Like we together would always say, oh man, I wish we were freer. I wish we could go more. I wish we could travel. I wish we didn't feel so encumbered by all of our crap, you know? And over the past several years, and we've documented this, if you go back to our episodes from a couple years ago, like we have just been in this process of getting rid of things, getting rid of distractions, not only like physical things that we've acquired because we were kind of trying to live up to somebody else's standard of success, you know, building the home, building all the decorations, and getting rid of those things, but also activities we waste our time on that kind of distract us from the things that really bring us joy. And we would always say like, freedom, I want freedom. And we'd go like on a weekend trip or something, and we'd be in an Airbnb, and it would be so sparse, you know, just the things we needed, just a suitcase of clothes, and maybe we'd bring a guitar or our PS4. And we'd have so much fun, and it would feel so good. And then I'd go back home, and I'd be like, why do I feel so like blue? I'd always have this depression after coming back from a place where I felt very like detached from like my identity that I had built with things, right? So I'd wanted that. And then I was about to get ourselves into a situation where we were just carrying that around with us and creating less freedom for ourselves. And then we reached this interruption. Like reality gave us this pattern interruption. And we were like, oh, we're actually being delivered exactly the thing we were asking for. Yeah.
And all we had to do was do the math and
and
realize...
be broke. No.
All we had to do was realize that for the same price it would have cost to move all of our stuff to Atlanta, we could keep it in a storage unit in Colorado for 4 years. And then we'll break even.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just wild how, like you said, you kind of, you want to live up to like a certain standard.
Right.
And you don't even realize that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like I had never noticed, and I was like, wait, I'm feeling pressure like from my parents who have never pressured me.
Overtly, right?
Right. They have like they're fully in support of both of us now pursuing like an artistic, creative career. And like if I went and got a job, like some corporation or like a bank, my dad would be like, oh, okay. Like he wouldn't even be happy about it.
Well, he'd be supportive of your decision.
He would.
But I think he'd kind of recognize that it's not what you're going for.
Right. Yet in my head, I'm like, I have to, have the house that people want to go to, and I have the pictures of the family and the tchotchkes, and because that's what they have. But they've never even pressured me to be like that. That's all my own doing. And it takes a long, long time to realize that that's happening. And here we are.
As far as tchotchkes and physical belongings, material belongings go, I want to talk more a little bit about how much of our identity we wrap up in them. Because in the last place we were renting ourselves, because we were briefly living with my mom and sister, we had extra bedrooms. We had so much stuff. We had a guest room we rarely had an occasion to use. And the guest room had like decorations in it. And it was like, why? Because I was drawing this weird sense of pride from just being able to have another person as a guest, which might be really authentic and beautiful for someone else, or maybe even for me at a later point in my life, but it was just empty, just everything collecting dust.
I think having the ability and the means to like host a guest, a loved one or a friend. Also, I think friends are loved ones sometimes, depending on who the friend is. Like I was thinking of how our friend James always comes and sleeps over. And I'm like, wait, James is a loved one. He's just not like a relative. And like there is something special about being able to host, but I think we just realized like we're not in that place yet.
It doesn't need to be a priority, you know?
But like, remember when my dad came and stayed, and like there's the whole guest room downstairs for him, and he was so comfortable. Like I did, I'm sure you also felt like that pride, like we're adults. But then fast forward to when we moved out of that house into Sarah's family's home, where we had one, albeit a very large room, we still only had one room. We were like, fuck, we have so much stuff that we now have to get rid of.
Right.
One way or another.
And I'm so glad that's another thing, another example of reality kind of serving you this limitation that reroutes you to a better place, a clearer place, a place that's more in proximity to where you're trying to get anyway. You just didn't know because we're just blinded by our conditioning, I guess.
It is really hard to handle though, because like part of us just wants to like put all of the stuff instead of in storage, just like out in the wilderness and like set it on fire and leave. Because we're like, just take it.
It might be healing.
Yeah.
Another thing, and then we can move on to the next topic, which I think is actually, which might be the juiciest part of the podcast because it's really cool. But as I've been gradually packing all my stuff in the kitchen, I'm realizing how much I have acquired and own because I'm a food blogger. And I would see other people, other content creators, and I'd like the way their photos look or the way their videos look and the props they had and all the styling. And I'd immediately be pulled into, I need all this stuff too. I've gone through different phases of this with different parts of my life. Like I'd start to study more filmmaking and video editing and be like, I need all this gear, or I need all this food styling stuff, and I need to acquire all these different kitchen tools and gadgets so I can make more interesting content. And I'd acquire it and I wouldn't use it, or I'd use it once because it wasn't coming from like an authentic place inside of myself. It was kind of just coming from the comparison and feeling like I'd see other people being successful, and I think that if I just copied all the steps they took, that I'd get there too. So I'm just going through everything we own in the kitchen and I'm like, shit, do I need this? Is this like, even to be a food blogger, could I do it in a more minimalistic way, more in a way that puts me back in touch with why I actually love cooking, you know? So that's been interesting to navigate.
Yeah, it's hard to sort through. It's hard to sort through the physical stuff, and then it's hard to sort through the thoughts you have about all the physical stuff. So like, as a musician, I've gone through things like that too, where I have guitar pedals on the floor here that aren't plugged in. And I'm like, I remember I bought the one on the end. I'm like, I bought that because like I thought it would serve some purpose or make me into a certain kind of guitar player. And it just like hasn't. And I'm like, I should probably get rid of that. Even like yesterday, we were talking about all the guitars we have. And you were like, do you want to sell your mandolin? And I'm like, no, I bought that in college because like I wanted I just like love it. It's such a beautiful instrument, and I literally never play it. Do you know why? Because I'm not a mandolin player. Like I could be. That's why I bought it. But I haven't tried to be. And I've had it for like 7 years. And I haven't, it's really hard to admit this publicly. I haven't really played it all that much ever. And I'm like, maybe I'm coming to this realization on the podcast. I'm like, maybe I should just sell the mandolin because someone else will get more use out of it. Like that's just not, maybe that's just not who I am, and that's okay.
Or it could be later when you actually feel like intrinsically motivated to do it.
Right.
There's nothing like more damaging to me in my day-to-day life than like seeing something I bought when I thought I was another person or when I was trying to be another person. And just like seeing the mental dollar sign, like what I paid for it, hovering over it and being like, shit, like I spent that much, so I have to use it. And then just every day, the same thing, like the wasted potential. But it's like you have infinite potential in every direction. What potential do you actually feel good pursuing, you know?
You just feel so confronted with like things you didn't do or tried to do and failed at. And the case of me with buying a mandolin, I'm being confronted with not ever having put in the effort.
Right.
But after that confrontation, now I'm thinking like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's truly, truly fine.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a lesson. Just consider it a, $500 lesson. No, it's fine. And like, it's so important, I think, to be able to liberate the things that we're not using because someone else could derive a lot of joy from it. And that comes back to you, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to list the mandolin on Facebook Marketplace after we finish the podcast. We live in Colorado. People are all about bluegrass here. Someone will buy it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to as you said, what's probably going to be the juiciest section.
How shall we get into this?
So I'll just dive right into it.
A little backstory.
This whole thing is about me and my dad. Okay, so Dad, if you're listening, you're going to get some great screen time right now. Well, not literally.
We'll just put some Glenn B-roll up on the screen.
We'll put it like a montage, where like our video is overlaid with videos of my dad. All right, that's enough. So when we were moving from California back to Colorado last year, we were driving through Arizona, and I was just looking at all the beautiful landscapes and all like the red rocks. And I was like, ever since I have lived out west, I always think about my family who lives in New York. And I'm like, I wonder if they ever like want to take trips out here, and like none of them are ever going to be on top of a 14er in Colorado. They're just not those kinds of people. They're not going to come visit Colorado and do like some crazy intense hike. And I'm like, I wonder if they're ever like, oh, I wish to see more of this place. And I especially was thinking about my dad. So we like stopped at a gas station during the drive, and I pulled out my phone and I texted him. I'm like, do you want to do some sort of like national park adventure with me at some point? Like we could rent a van and I don't know, we could go to like Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon or something. And then we started driving again. And a few hours later, I picked up my phone again and he had answered me. And I fully expected him to be like, no, I don't. Because he likes to stay in hotels and stuff. I mean, so do I. I just didn't think he would want to do this kind of dirty adventure thing. But to my surprise, he was like, fuck yeah, that sounds amazing. So we were just talking about like taking this van trip to Yellowstone at like the beginning of this fall. So this year came around and it was like January, and my dad was like, we got to start planning this Yellowstone trip. And I was like, okay. And we both did like the tiniest bit of research, but neither of us could fully get invested in planning this trip. For me, I'm just like, I've been trying to figure out like a long-term career, and we've been trying to figure out like where we're going to go next. It's just like there was so much going on in my life that I just couldn't find the mental capacity to do research.
Right. And every time I would ask Eric about it, he'd be like, I don't know. And I was so shocked because, rewind back to the start of this episode, Eric is Mr. Logistics. Every time something needs to be planned, he's on it. He's proactive about it. So I was really shocked that he wasn't already like having everything laid out like night by night.
And my dad's kind of the same way. And he did do the bulk of the small amount of research we ended up doing. And he was like, oh, we could go here, then here, then here. And the whole motivation behind this trip was, like I said before, Yellowstone is a place that my dad and I both have always wanted to see. And we wanted to have like a week of bonding time. And we wanted to both get out of our comfort zones, like just going around in a van and, I don't know, not showering and pooping in a bucket, you know, sorry, like that kind of thing. And so there were just all these factors. Like, this is why we want to go do this trip together. And then we just didn't really plan it. So then it was getting down to like late spring, and like Yellowstone books very, very early, right? So we were like, if we don't like book our cabins or our camp spots, you know, like before May is over, like we're boned. Like we're not going to get anything. And then my dad started having this hip problem. And long story short, he needs a hip replacement, which is now going to happen next month. But he was just in extreme pain. And he was like, I don't know if I can go on this trip. I don't know if I'm going to need a hip replacement. And I'm like, we don't know where we're moving. The whole thing just fell apart. And it ended up being, well, do you have any thoughts on what I've said so far?
Not really.
No? Okay. I wasn't sure if there's anything anything I missed or skipped over. It's basically the whole trip, we're like, we're doing it next year. There's too much going on. We couldn't plan it in time. 2023, we'll do it. So then my dad asked me, he was like, so when I have this hip surgery, will you fly up to New York by yourself? So I don't love flying. I like flying, but being on an airplane gives me anxiety. And when I'm with Sarah, I'm better. When I take Klonopin before I board, I'm fine. I would like to train myself to not rely on meds every time I fly. So kind of since the Yellowstone trip fell apart, we were presented with a new opportunity for me to get out of my comfort zone, fly from Atlanta to New York by myself, kind of help take care of my dad for a week or so and have a little bonding time together. And yeah.
Well, just to provide a little more context, if you're kind of new to the podcast, last year, maybe, or early this year, we did an episode about how Eric has been having some anxiety about going places alone just over the past year, I guess. And I think a lot of that stems from like just us being together constantly over the course of the pandemic. I feel like, I mean, when we shared that episode, I think a lot of people reached out and said they were dealing with something similar.
Yeah.
So that has been something that he hasn't really needed to resolve as much, just because we both work from home and we're presented with very few opportunities to, like, nothing really makes us go anywhere alone.
Right. I have to be like, oh, we need more Oatly for lattes. I'm going to go by myself just to go do something like there's no, usually we just go together, but we've been forcing ourselves. I'm like, let me just go to the grocery store by myself. So that's like a whole nother thing where aside from the actual anxiety of flying or about flying, it's also like, oh, I'm going to do this whole thing by myself.
Alone.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was just this weird existential moment where we were like, well, now we're losing this whole trip and we're losing like all the positives we were going to get out of it. And most of the reason is because my dad has to have this surgery, which is going to be painful and, you know, it's surgery. So we were like, wait, there is something good coming out of it, which is we can achieve the same things and we can have the same kind of experience for a much different reason. And the last thing that I haven't even mentioned about this whole Yellowstone trip is that like last week there was this insane flooding in Montana and in Yellowstone, and they had to close the park and like evacuate everyone out. And I mean, not making this about my experience and me and my dad's experience, because it's like a whole global warming, climate change mess. But now it's like, wait, even if we had planned the trip, could we have even gone? Or
Right.
is it all going to be closed and everything? So that was just a weird, like, wow, okay, maybe our trip would have gotten messed up anyway.
Right.
So all this to say, now we're going to be able to basically have the same experiences and get the same thing, the same bonding things out of it. Just in
And
a
you're going to be challenged to leave your comfort zone, which is very
personally,
important.
yeah. And yeah,
And I think that because you guys will go on the trip maybe next year or the year after, and both of you will be able to do it in more comfort because he'll be in more physical comfort and you will have already kind of stretched your boundaries. You won't be dunked into this crazy like experience without having kind of expanded your boundaries again first.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I think it'll be an overall better experience in the future.
Who knows what we'll be able to do with my dad's fresh new metal hip and my fresh new brain.
Right.
So you want to segue this into
Speaking of dads and sons and health issues and anxiety.
yeah. So so just in trying to conquer this anxiety once and for all, I've been going to play basketball a lot at the park that's like very close to our house.
Walking distance.
Yeah, usually Sarah comes with me, and we'll like listen to a book or like read or sit under a tree in our camping chair and just like enjoy being outside, which is very much your personality.
Lazy.
Comfortable.
Thirsty.
Whereas mine, I'm like running around getting as sweaty as possible playing basketball. But the other day, I was like, I want to go play before I have to teach this lesson. And Sarah was like, I don't want to go. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go by myself. And it was just a little like, oh, I'm going to go by myself. Okay. Let's see what let's see what happens. It just seems so silly to say. So then I went and I was like, you're going to be fine. You're close to the house. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're just going to play basketball like you always do. Mm-hmm. So then I got there and there was a guy and an older guy playing basketball together. And they were like, oh, we're just wrapping up. Like, then you can play. And I was like, I was going to ask if you guys wanted to, all three of us, play together. Mm-hmm. And the older guy, who was the younger guy's dad, was like, oh, you guys play one-on-one and like, I'll hang to the side. So I started playing with this guy and he was much, much taller than me, like most people who play basketball are. And it was just a very unfair matchup. So he was like, oh, Dad, why don't you come back in and play and you guys can play against me. So like the short guy and the old guy against the tallest, most fit guy. We're like, okay. So we're just playing and kind of like playing casually and having fun and chatting. And then the son quipped at his dad. He was like, oh, you're doing pretty well for a guy who died last year. And I was like, what? Who says that? And I was like, yeah, what? Can you guys fill me in on that? And he was like, oh, well, I'm visiting my son. Like I live in California. And last year I came to visit. I got off the plane at Denver International Airport and I had a heart attack and died. And I was revived. Someone gave me CPR. I was revived at the airport. And here I am. And I was like, you can't just drop that that's crazy. You can't just drop that on a stranger. And I was just like floored and perplexed. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, congratulations. Like, it's amazing. Not only that he's alive, but that we're all playing basketball together, like randomly. So if you don't know this about me, when I was 10, I had a pacemaker put in because my heart was stopping while I was asleep and they happened to catch it. And here I am living to tell the tale. So I told the dad, I was like, yeah, I had a pacemaker put in when I was 10, which is most people get pacemakers when they're like 70, mm-hmm. right? So he was like, oh my God. So we just had this kind of bond connection. I gave him a fist bump. I was like, look at us here playing basketball together. The two like heart thing survivors.
Heart thing.
Heart issues.
Cardiac event survivors.
Cardiac event survivors, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just kept playing and we just had a great time and I felt zero anxiety. I just felt like totally connected to these people mm-hmm. and was just able to play. And then they left and I was there by myself shooting around just like, wow, I'm so blessed to be alive. Being alive is awesome. I can't believe I'm alive. Why would I have any anxiety? And it was just another very synchronistic
mm-hmm.
moment.
Right. It was like you got rewarded for going out of your comfort zone, going alone, which you hadn't been able to, like even a week prior. And yeah, just what are the chances?
Yeah, not only that there would be people who were nice and inviting and fun to play with, but we were able to bond over this very specific, somewhat related physical issue that we both had.
Yeah.
And then I came home and I was like, babe,
Right.
oh my God, this thing happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. I was very happy and proud of you that you went.
Thank you. Can I go again today, or am I didn't feel great yesterday, and Sarah was like, you're not allowed to play basketball today or tomorrow. And I was like, but I feel fine today. Let me go play.
He would like lie on the couch. He'd be like drinking water, eating some soup. He'd be like, I feel terrible. Then like 20 minutes later, he's like, we got to go to the storage unit. We got to drop off a couple loads of stuff. And I'm like, babe, you're not going to get better if you keep doing this.
I'm like, but we got to move.
And I'm like, we literally have 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Should we? I feel it's so weird. I feel like all the examples are my things today.
It's all good.
It's very strange.
We have just a couple that we'll touch on of examples where things that at face value are negative, but there's a hidden lesson in them, a hidden upside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in some ways the universe just delivering you exactly what you were asking for in an unconventional package. I know this is like a little woo-woo for some people, but
It's not woo-woo, it's true.
I don't prefer to believe that we're just in this chaotic, meaningless universe. You know, I like to believe that things happen for a reason. That's my worldview that I've adopted that I feel makes me happier. I had the other worldview for many years because I was depressed.
The other worldview being?
Not everything's just random. It's just chaotic. There's no meaning. There's no reason for any of it. It's all bad. Like bad shit and it does just happen. But I think there is a way to extract some meaning from everything. Everything is just like, I just pretend I'm in a movie, you know? I'm just building my mythology. I'm just Harry Potter and some bad shit happened to me and then I'm going to be a hero and have a really cool scar.
You know, isn't it funny that like sometimes I'll watch movies where people are going off and doing things by themselves. And I'm like, look how easy, like it's so easy. Like they're just like going into the wilderness by themselves. They're not having anxiety. And then I'm like, wait, they're on a set with a bunch of people. Yeah. They're not actually in the wilderness. And that's why it seems easy, because it's not real. But I don't know. For some people, doing that is totally fine. Like our friend James, who we were talking about, and Yellowstone. Last year, he just drove up to Yellowstone by himself and like camped for a week. And I was like, that sounds terrifying.
Right.
That's so far.
Yeah.
So far away.
And I mean, just to tie this back into what I was saying at the beginning of the first section, which is like when you're living your life, you have all of these skills and gifts and you completely forget about it. Like James is probably not thinking like, oh man, I'm so brave going camping. But it's like, to me, I'm like, that's unfathomable. Like I wish I had the bravery to do that, you know? But
I do know.
Just always remember what like skills you have.
What you're good at.
Give yourself some credit.
And also, if you're struggling with something now, maybe you weren't struggling with it at a different time of your life. And you can remind yourself, like for me, this anxiety thing, it's only been for like the last year or so. I'm like, I've lived 27 years before that where I did not give a shit if I were alone. So I just have to be like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
You've just kind of like gone into this new place in your life where this thing has kind of manifested or started. But like,
yeah,
and it's not broken.
Right. And as challenging as it is and as crappy as it is, and as crappy as it would be if you chose to just stay in it, like you are going to learn a lot from the experience and have a lot of depth added to your perspective. And that's artistic fodder there. Like as someone who writes music, I think you can use everything really.
So let's mosey on to the next
One last
example.
Yeah.
So
speaking of music,
a few weeks ago, I've been, so for the last year plus, I've been doing freelance music work making theme songs, etc. And I've been teaching music production, songwriting lessons over Zoom, which is very fulfilling. And it's kind of always been in this place where I have like a few students, and it hasn't really been like a lot. Like it's not like I'm waking up and I have like 10 hours in a row. Like I have 10 students every single day. It's kind of like every day I have 1, 2, whatever. It's just a little bit. But I've noticed, I was like, just recently too, as I've been kind of having more students and more freelance work, I'm like, I haven't made anything on my own accord, I haven't made any of my own stuff in a while. Because usually what I would do is I would show my students, like we'd look at, for most of the session, we'd look at what they're working on. And then like the last 5 minutes, it'd be like, oh, let me show you something cool. See if you have any questions about what I'm doing. And I'm like, I don't have anything to show because everything I've been making has been for a client. And I'm also using a lot of my creative musical energy and knowledge to teach people. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Maybe if it was like an extremely lucrative career, I'd be like, I wouldn't have maybe come to this conclusion, but it's teaching. Teaching is, you know.
Right.
So
It's funny because it's like teachers don't get paid that much, but then you go online and coaches are always like serving you Instagram ads. How I scaled my coaching business to 7 figures. And I'm like, really? Really? Is this a Ponzi scheme? Usually it is, but anyway.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Yeah, I mean, if I could charge $300 for a session, I would keep teaching music production lessons, but that ain't going to happen for a few reasons. So I was kind of just, well, mostly because I would, who's going to, never mind. So I was just thinking, I was like, do I want to continue doing this? Because like Sarah and I weren't singing. I wasn't writing music.
We were singing, but we weren't making anything.
That's true.
We were just practicing a lot.
Yeah. And then kind of I externalized these thoughts to Sarah. And then literally over the next 2 days, like most of my students were like, hey man, like I got to focus on school. Work has been crazy. I'm having a baby. Just like.
Who's having a baby?
No one. I made that one up.
Okay.
Sorry. That was an elaborate lie. Just one by one, most of my students
Paused.
I've been left with 2 students, 2 every other week. And I'm like, wow, I can't explain that. Like, I don't know. Everyone's life got busy at the same exact time around me after I had said that. And I was like, well, here's the space I was looking for.
Reality's like, try it on, see what happens. And you could choose to be like, wow, I'm cursed. I'm going to be broke. And just spend all of your time being anxious, and doing things to distract yourself from the anxiety. Or you could be like, all right, reality, mission accepted. I'm just going to, everything that I wanted to do with that extra freedom, I'm going to do it now. I'm going to lean into it.
And what have I been doing? I've been sitting at the piano, just like playing.
Right.
Just because I want to. And it's not a time thing. Right? It's not like, because like I said, I didn't have, a billion students a day where I didn't have time to like eat. I just didn't want to do music. I would have like, even after one lesson, I'm like, I want to do something else. I want to like play baseball video games. I don't want to go look at music some more, And it's a lot less energetically draining. Like if I were working on my music, I could work on my music for hours. But it's like something about leaning into somebody else's creative work that kind of doesn't.
I mean, you do love it.
I do love it.
He always comes out of his lessons and he's like, has so much to say and he loves all of his students. Yeah. So it is like,
it's rewarding in a certain way, right? Because I'm like, oh, I love that I can help people like achieve their dreams. And then I'm like, but if my dream is to make music, I'm like, I'm not really achieving mine by doing this,
I think you would have the capacity to teach a lot of students if you figured out how you wanted to be making music on your own first. It just wasn't leaving a lot of space for that. But I think once you're kind of in the flow of making your own music again, I would bet that then your students are going to be like, oh, I want to resume lessons now. And you're like, cool. I'm in this like nice equilibrium. Everything's moving. Yeah. I bet that's going to happen.
Yeah. That's why like, that is true. Yeah. And I am figuring it out right now. We both are, you know? And that's why I'm like, should I just basically do what I do for music production, but like with podcasts and just help people start podcasts and stuff? I'm like, cause that's not music, but it's something I also am knowledgeable about and technically proficient in. So that would be fun too. If you want to start a podcast, let me know. But yeah, I think both are good. And like you said, I think I just need to kind of take this time to explore what I want to be doing, and then maybe people will come back and I'll be able to compartmentalize the situation.
It's good timing too, because we are in such flux right now. And it'll be better for you to be working with clients when we're settled in the next place, you know?
Or at least settled in the idea that we're going to be moving around. Right?
I just love the idea of that.
It doesn't sound that difficult to, once we know what we're bringing and the cars are filled and everything else is gone, I don't think it's going to be that hard to move from place to place, because we know everything's going to fit exactly the way it fit the first time, unless we like buy something, which we are absolutely not allowed to do.
Right. It's crazy how little, like, as we've been packing stuff away, I've just been kind of aggressive about putting stuff in storage early, because I'm like so curious about how I will feel when I have just the essentials like in my field, you know? And I packed a bunch of kitchen stuff. I've always wanted, like, over like the past 5 years, I'm like, babe, let's just like get rid of all our dishes except for like one plate and one fork and one spoon for each of us. And we're never running the dishwasher, and there isn't a bunch of dirty dishes like piled in the sink. And like, I just have always, my entire life, I'm just like craving emptiness. I can't explain it. I get a high when I'm dropping stuff off at like the Goodwill. Not Goodwill. That's not the best place to donate. But
yeah, apparently Goodwill kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Either way, a donation center.
I love emptying out. I love it. I'm addicted to it. So that's what we've been going through. Where was I going with this? I'm just really curious to see how the next several months go with just what is essential to us, because I'm realizing even at the beginning of this moving process that I use so little. I have been getting so much use out of our Nintendo Switch. I'm like, I don't need any other hobbies. I just love playing. I've been playing Stardew Valley. I'm obsessed with it. I play video games like in the most intense way. Like I research them. I have to optimize my gameplay and my time.
Yeah, she's had like the Stardew Valley wiki page open. I mean, it was the same thing when we started playing Civ 6, where like we had the wiki open because we were like, what does it mean? What do we do?
Right.
How do we do it as efficiently as possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did. We're good at it.
Right. So I've been doing that. Eric's been playing basketball, watching some baseball, playing some music. It's like there's so little. And when there's so few things like in your visual field to react to or to be your options, it's like you really get to this really solid, like good feeling of like, this is what I really want to be doing.
I mean, like the very first example that we gave in this episode about realizing we should put all of our shit in a storage unit, that was one of the most like freeing experiences we've ever had in a relationship, when we were like, we can just leave it. And it was literally like a ton of bricks was lifted off of both of our shoulders.
And I'm fully open to spending a few months somewhere else and then being like, you know what? I'm going to fly back to Colorado and sell a bunch of our furniture, like downgrade to a much smaller unit that costs less just to keep our essentials, and then explore more. Like, who knows? I'm open to literally anything.
Yeah. So the objective here, the moral of the story is try not to strong arm your way through what's going on, because sometimes the universe or whatever it is trying to tell you something. Or trying
Right.
to push you in the right direction, and
Or-
you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Deliver what you want, deliver what you're asking for. We could have just been like, you know what? Fine, we'll pay all of the thousands of dollars to move our shit. Couple months pass, we're like, dang, we don't want to actually be here. We got to lug it all over the country again. We got to put it in storage now. And we have something much better and much freer instead.
Yes, ma'am. All right, well, I'm going to go play basketball. Okay, no, I'm not. I'm not.
No, I think you're good.
I think
you're
I'm good
feeling
too.
good today.
Yeah. So is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Damn. We really, okay. Cool.
Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Leave us a review, preferably a positive one.
Please leave us a 5-star review. iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening. If you can review, that helps us. And hey, go check out our website. We built a website, whatislifedude.com. I'm really happy with it. It looks really cute. It's like very satisfying. It's very aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So go browse it, check it out, and we will talk to you in our next episode. Maybe from here, maybe from Atlanta, and in the future, maybe from Costa Rica. Who knows?
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.